90% of amateur pickleball players use a one-handed backhand. But if you watch most high-level or pro players play, usually you're going to see two-handers. Even pro pickleball players that grew up with a one-handed backhand in tennis, like Christian Alshon, have switched to a two-hander in pickleball because of the crazy advantages that it brings. So in this video, first, I'm gonna show you the advantages of the two-hander over the one-hander. Then I'm gonna give you a full tutorial on how and when to use a two-hander. So in terms of the advantages of the two-hander over the one-hander, the first is that the two-hander makes it a lot easier to get topspin. So as you can see on these shots, I'm hitting topspin like I would on my forehand. So on forehands, you generally see players hitting with topspin, which is essentially the aggressive spin. So the two-hander is generally used for topspin. You're never gonna slice with your two-hander, which I'll talk more about later. The other advantage of the two-hander over the one-hander is because you have two hands, you have more stability and strength behind the ball. With one hand, it's just a little bit challenging to get that strength because you're using a smaller muscle with the back of your wrist and the back of your arm versus your whole pectoral muscle and your whole forearm. And you can get a little bit of the right arm into it too. I'll go more into the technique of it later. Overall though, that two-hander just has a higher ceiling in terms of how far you can take the backhand, which is why you see 90% of pros using this over a one-hander. The big caveat to this though is that when I say two-handers are better than one-handers, I'm specifically referring to the topspin stroke. So it's probably better in the long run for most players to do a two-hander than a one-hander on a topspin shot like you just saw there. When you're slicing it though, you want to maintain your one-hander. So you never are gonna slice with the two-hander technique. So you might already be only slicing on your backhand anyways. So if you're already slicing with a one-hander and that's the only backhand that you have, which I know most players don't have a topspin backhand, you can just think of the two-hander as an added bonus. This is giving you the ability to be aggressive off of your left side. So for a lot of players, the two-hander is their topspin and the one-hander is their slice. There's obviously some exceptions to that with like backhand rolls at the kitchen, but in most cases when they're hitting the ball off the bounce, they're using the two-hander for topspin and the one-hander for slice. So this is more of a bonus than a full-on replacement to your one-handed backhand. Now guys, I'm gonna break down the exact technique that you have to understand on the two-hander to be able to hit all the different types of shots around the court. So that means drives from the back of the court, topspin dinks with the two-hander from the kitchen, counterattacks, and drops from the baseline. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the two-hander, and I'm gonna break down all the different techniques that you have to know to make that happen. Before I get into that, I wanted to mention that right now we're running a crazy sale for Black Friday on our Duo paddle. This is our brand new paddle that just launched. Right now you can get this for $45 off, which makes it $155 after you use code FRIDAY at checkout. So that's an insane deal. This is one of the best foam paddles on the market. It's been reviewed as that. I'm not just saying it. It's actually been agreed upon that this is one of the best foam paddles on the market. It's gonna give you a lot more power. So if you want to have a little bit more aggression in your game, this is a great paddle to make it happen. It also has a longer handle. It's an elongated paddle, this shape. So it makes it easier to use a two-handed backhand. I'm gonna explain the technique, but it's kind of hard to hit a two-handed backhand if your handle is too short. So if you wanna add this shot to your game, and you want a crazy Black Friday deal, head to our site now and get the Duo. So the first thing that you have to keep in mind that applies to every type of two-handed backhand, and this is the most important part of two-handed backhand technique, is the grip. So how do we hold the paddle on a two-hand? There's actually only one right way to do this. On our forehand and serve, there's a few different ways you could do it. On the two-hander, there's really one way to do it. So it starts off with your right hand or your dominant hand. So with your dominant hand, you should have the continental grip, which is essentially like you're shaking someone's hand. In this grip, it should be really easy to go from your backhand to your forehand. That's why we use it for volleys too. But you want to have the continental grip with your dominant hand, and with your non-dominant hand, you want to essentially slide it down the face of the paddle into an Eastern grip. And as you can see, my finger actually rests on the paddle because I have wider hands. If you have skinnier hands, you can actually potentially get both of your hands fully on the grip, but most people actually don't have skinny enough hands to do that. So it's actually fine to put your finger on the face of the paddle because this automatically puts you into the Eastern grip. So you want the Eastern grip with your non-dominant hand and the continental grip with your dominant hand. They should be touching each other, and your dominant hand should be slid down towards the bottom of the paddle. You have to have this sort of grip to be good with a two-hander, regardless of whether you're hitting dinks, drives, any sort of two-hander. You have to have this grip. The next part of the two-hander that's really important technically is that when you're hitting a two-hander, you want to have a left-handed dominance when you're hitting the ball because you really need to make sure you're extending out forward. Whereas on a one-hander, you don't have as much reach forward as you do with your left hand. So it's a very different motion. So a great way to practice this is to literally just hit with only your left hand. So as you can see, I'm using the exact same grip. So I'm in my two-handed backhand grip with my left hand, but I'm only using my left hand to hit the ball. And if you do this enough, you're gonna get very comfortable and confident with using your left hand as the dominant stroke. And if you watch me do it, you'll see it looks pretty natural, because this is something, I was a tennis player, so I learned how to do this so I could hit two-handed backhands in tennis. You kind of have to be able to do this to a certain extent to hit natural, fluid, and loose two-handed backhands. So this is just something to think about, and it helps a lot when you add your right hand on. So I'm going to take you through the technique now in order of these shots in terms of what I think is actually the most beneficial for most players to learn. So we're going to start off with dinks, because I think that the two-handed backhand topspin dink is a shot that almost every player needs to learn at some point, because it's very hard to hit a topspin dink with one hand. And if you don't have a topspin dink on the left side or on the right side, if you're a lefty, you can't really be very aggressive from your left side. So you're kind of just going to have a defensive slice dink that's going to make it easy for your opponents to attack. So topspin dinks on the backhand look like this. You see, it's a very, very compact motion. I'm riding up the back of the ball to give it that spin, but it's very different than what you imagine a drive from the back of the court looks like. So what's going on here? You can see my motion. It's really just a very linear. So I'm going up and down with a slight forward push, right? So I'm pushing with my left arm. Usually you're taking these dinks cross court. Pushing with my left arm while sort of riding up the back of the ball. So it's really just like this. And I'm facing towards the court. So this would technically be considered an open stance since I'm facing the net in front of me. But all I'm doing is pushing up the back of the ball with this grip while going forward. The best players sort of add a little bit of flair with their wrist. So just like you can do this on your forehand, you can also add a little bit of flair with your wrist on your backhand. But you don't have to do this actually. When I'm dinking, I can actually lock my wrist and still get a good amount of topspin just by riding up the back of it. But here I'll add some wrist. You'll see what it looks like. If I add a little bit, definitely gives me more when I'm doing these dinks. So that's sort of the most advanced way to do it. One thing to think about, I'm definitely holding the paddle a little bit tighter with my left hand than my right. I want my right to be a little looser on this shot, but it should still be gripping somewhat firm. So about a 3 out of 10 on my right, about a 6 out of 10 on my left. And I'm just very simple motion. You want to make sure you hit the center of the paddle so that you don't hit a dead spot and the ball goes into the net. So really focus on the center. Other than that, to aim it, you're just pushing towards your target with your paddle. You're just pushing towards your target and you're trying to aim it for your dinking target. Another thing to think about, if you get pulled really far out wide on your one-handed dink, what you do is you sort of cup around the ball with your wrist. You set your wrist and you cup around it. I'm starting to see a lot of pros do this on their two-handers too, where they cup around it and they have their two-hander ready. So even on a really wide shot, they can still give it that aggressive topspin. So you sort of set your wrist beforehand before you give it that upward movement to get the topspin, and it lets you hit an aggressive topspin dink regardless of where you're standing in the kitchen. And another two-handed technique that you can do in combination with your dinks is a two-handed speed up. So if I'm dinking cross court with my two-handed topspin dinks, what I can do is I can use my two-hander to also do an aggressive topspin speed up. This is really hard to do if I'm only using one hand. You pretty much never see anyone do that because it's just too hard. And if you're hitting topspin dinks and all of a sudden you change to some different technique, they might suspect that you're going to speed up. So doing two hands for both dinking and speeding up is actually a much better disguise. So all we're doing here, similar technique to our dink because we want to disguise it. So you want to set up like you're hitting a dink and then you use your wrist to really flick it at them so they don't have enough time to react. So what that wrist action looks like, I'm really just extending, I'm using my left hand to sort of hinge my wrist forward and up to give me topspin, but to also give me power. So I'm really just flicking it quickly, and that gives me enough power to do a successful speed up. So the next two-handed technique, and one of the most important, is the drive from the back of the court. But this one is also probably the hardest to master in my experience. There's a lot that goes into being able to hit the ball hard and then getting a consistent level of power. So the first thing that you have to think about is that on a drive, most of your power is coming from rotation. So on your forehand, it's important to rotate, but you can kind of get away with just using your arm since you can go really fast with one arm. On your backhand, you don't have the same whippiness with two hands. You have to really think about rotation. So when you're preparing for a two-hander, generally you want to be close stance. It's kind of hard to hit a two-hander open stance if you don't have that technique down. You want to be close stance and you want to start here and finish like this. So you go from here to here like you're doing a golf swing. If you don't do this, it's gonna feel like you get no power. So if just by rotating, I can already get pretty good power without even using my arms. You just really have to focus on that rotation when you're hitting the ball. The next thing is your take back. As I rotate, I get into this position. So I point my paddle straight back behind me because I need to give myself as much room as I can to accelerate. So if you're just going like this, that's not enough room to accelerate. You're not gonna be able to hit the ball hard. When you hit your two-hander, you turn and your paddle goes straight back, and then you use your rotation to fling your paddle towards the ball forward. So you rotate first, and then your paddle and your arms fall behind it. The combination of the take back and those two things is gonna give you a lot more power. One more. The next thing is what you do with your wrist. You wanna be making contact out in front to the side of your body, but as you're accelerating towards the ball, you kind of want to have a little bit of wrist lag like you do on your forehand. It's not as dramatic as the wrist lag on your forehand, but you should be accelerating with your paddle facing back a little bit. And then when you hit the ball, you kind of drive your wrist through it a little bit. It's not as dramatic as on the forehand, but that does give you a lot of bonus power and it gives you a lot of spin. So when I take back my paddle, I have my wrist cocked back, my left wrist cocked back. And as I hit it, I give it a little bit of this. This is more dramatic than what I do on my actual shot, but just a little bit, and it gives you that extra pop that gives you real power, so you're actually hitting the ball hard. In terms of where you follow through, you want to finish somewhere up here. You can finish over your shoulder, but you just need to get to about here because you want to make sure that you're going from low to high so you get that top spin. So you want to finish your stroke facing towards the net with your paddle somewhere up here. When you first try to hit the two-handed backhand, if you've never done it, especially on the drive, it's going to feel very tight. So you need to make sure you give it some time, right? You're not going to be able to get it overnight. You need to practice staying loose with all these different techniques that we're going through while making sure you're using the right grip and driving with your left hand. Then you're going to get the hang of it, but you're not going to look like this on day one. It's going to feel very tight at first. So the way that you loosen up is by hitting it a million times. It's not going to feel very natural from the beginning. The next technique, and this is a newer one you didn't see as much before, is the two-handed backhand topspin drop. So pretty much this is giving people the ability to hit topspin on their drops from their backhand side. You're seeing all the pros starting to use this because it's just making their drops more aggressive. Pros are pretty much using topspin drops 80% of the time now. So they want to be able to do it on their backhands too. It's essentially just like an extended dink from the back of the court. So think about that dinking technique, except obviously you're going more forward because we're going, from the back of the court and we're not going so cross court, and we're going up. I have my wrists locked. Give it maybe a little bit of that windshield wiper technique, but it's pretty simple. I'm just riding up the back of the ball. I don't really rotate at all. I'm hitting the ball primarily by pushing forward with my arm. So it takes a lot of practice, but if you get it down, there's a very large reward because you're gonna make your opponent's fourth shot a lot more difficult. The last two-handed technique that you might wanna learn, it's kind of optional, is the two-handed backhand counter attacks. You see a lot of pros do this. Instead of countering with one hand like this, they use two hands, which a lot of people prefer it. I personally actually use one hand, but if you want to, you just literally turn quickly and you counter. So it's a very simple motion. There's not much you can do in that short amount of time. You go from your ready position and you turn sideways. You can use a little bit of rotation and then you just rotate back right away. It's a very quick motion. I don't like it because it feels like I get jammed when I do it, but a lot of pros use this and they do it very well. So if you try this, it might be your preferred way of countering. And it's a good way, to get more power if you don't feel like you have that confidence with one hand. What you need to remember is that the two-handed backhand is not something that you get overnight. I can't stress this enough. You're not gonna go out there tomorrow on the courts, try it for the first time and hit it well. It's gonna take you a while and you're gonna really need to understand the techniques to do it consistently. In terms of the techniques that matter most, 100% focus on your grip, focus on the left arm dominance, and focus on extending towards your target with your left hand. If you do these three things and you practice a lot, the shot will come, but it will come slowly. So give it a chance. Make sure you go practice it. Don't just go into games with it. You need to actually drill this shot with people in order to get it down. But when you do, you'll be a way better player. And guys, as a reminder, our Black Friday sale is running right now. We have this paddle on a huge discount, and this is probably the best paddle that we've ever made. So if you want to support our channel, make sure to go get this while it's at its cheapest price that it's going to be for a very long time. We also have all of our other stuff on sale for Black Friday. So if you've been interested in the Dink Master or any of our other paddles, make sure to head to our site and check those out too. And if you guys have any questions about the two-handed backhand technique, make sure to go ask them in the comments and I will personally answer them myself for the first week that this video is posted. Thanks for watching, guys.